Welcome to another episode of Grow Your Life. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and in this episode, we have a listen to learn topic around the idea of pricing and understanding your pricing as a small business and freelancer. What does pricing mean? How do I lean into it? How do I leverage it? And how does it help me grow my business and move towards my financial goals? So I'm with Jason Long, my longtime friend. Say hello, Jason.
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
We've known each other for a long time. You own a marketing agency, and as I did before, and that's how we originally got connected. And I've just stayed friends over the years, getting together and sharing life and helping each other through different challenges. So tell us about who you are, what you're doing now, and then how that informs why we should listen to you about pricing.
All right. So my name is Jason Long. I've been in business for myself now for about 20 years. I've run businesses in many, many areas, from tech to agriculture. I own a portfolio of software as a service, productized services, agencies, outsourcing, and other traditional businesses. And I'm currently operating as the leader of one of the largest long-term care electronic health records companies in the US. And for all the years that I spent doing all these things, I learned a lot of lessons that I love to share with people.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much. So let's start with undercharging pricing, right? So I can relate to this, in the agency days, projects, we didn't charge enough, didn't have enough resources to deliver on it. And we get to I remember during certain seasons where that would lead to some challenges. So what does it mean to not charge enough, and how does that unfold?
I mean, to not charge enough means that you're not making enough money to
but
pay
I
your
think
bills.
when someone thinks they're charging enough, they may not be. So why is there a discrepancy between what we think is enough and not enough?
Well, I think that there are certainly times when people aren't making enough money, but they can't equate it to not charging enough. But it's usually
Okay.
pretty easy because you can just ask the question, how many hours are you working? Are you working
Yeah.
all the time? And not just working on the project work, but actually working on the marketing and the finance and sending bills and like all the other things you're doing. How much time are you working on the business? And if
Yeah.
the answer is I'm working all the time and you're not making enough money, well, then if you don't raise your rates, you don't charge more money, then you're not going to be able to run the business. By the way, I thought of one other little reason you should listen. I also
Yeah.
studied economics in
Okay.
college, which, by the way, this is pretty simple economics, right?
Yeah.
Like all my hours are used and I'm not making enough money, so
Yeah.
my business isn't going to work. Or I can
Yeah.
charge more money for the hours I'm working, or I can potentially just work less hours. All of these
Yeah.
things are possible.
Well, so for you, since you went into school, you understood that, I assume, before you started businesses. So did that actually help you do it, or did you still learn the lessons the hard way?
Oh, I learned the lesson so hard, like so hard. When we first got started, it was a business partner and I. And when we first got started, this was in 2001, I think. He and I started working together. It was my third business in
Okay.
2001. He and I started working together. I want to say we were charging $35 an hour, something like
Okay.
that, which at the time was still low for what we were doing. And we it just wasn't working. We were struggling. And finally, we went and we took a look at the books and we were like, oh, we got to charge more money. And we weren't sure that people would accept that. We didn't know what was going to happen. But at the end of the day, it was like either charge more money or go find another job because we're killing ourselves for nothing. And
Yeah.
at the same time, we were also very much learning our craft. And so we had a lot of learning time. We had a lot of business learning time. And then we had actually doing the job time. And by the way, it was web development at the time.
Okay.
Um, Web development, a little bit of digital marketing.
Yeah.
And it was just, I think we jumped from 35 an hour to 55 an hour to 75 an hour pretty quickly. I think maybe over the course of a year. And
Okay.
that made a big difference. But then the business got bigger. There were more
Hmm.
people, there were more mouths to feed. And then we jumped to 95 an hour. And at that point, things got a little more difficult because my business partner at the time, he would disagree probably with where he was on the target then, but at the time he didn't want to go above 95 an hour. What he was saying is, let's bring the rate down, we could sell more. And
Quality versus quantity kind of thing.
exactly. Well, I think that he was saying that we're not billing all of our hours anyway, and so
Oh, okay.
we need to bill all of our hours at a lower rate. And what I said is, I think that the market will take a much higher rate and they'll pay us more money. Instead, we can just charge the same rate, still bill not the same rate. We can bill a higher rate, and still charge for all of our hours, and we're still going to get paid for it. And
Yeah.
the company struggled really hard during that time. And finally, it finally came to a point where we were going to go out of business if we didn't make a change. And he stepped down from being the CEO. I stepped up to being the CEO. And pretty quickly, we jumped our rate from $95 an hour to $120 an hour. And you want to know how many people said anything about it?
0?
One person.
Yeah.
One person asked one question. We had a lot of customers at that point. I want to say we had hundreds of customers at this point. One person. And it was one person because we were in the middle of their project. And what we should have done is wait till the end of their project and bill more afterwards, or bill them for the start of the next project. We upped the rate in the middle. Should have done that. But that one person said something.
Yeah. And was it even like like, I'm not moving forward if you don't keep it, or was it just I'm concerned?
I'm concerned. Why are you billing me more money? We raised our rates. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that was that. And I do think that we said, don't worry, we're going to bill you the rate you were at till the end of this project. And
got it.
And that was that. But it hurt. It hurt really, really badly. And
what hurt about it?
It hurt because I had been working my butt off for so freaking long.
So you regretted not doing it earlier.
Exactly. Like stressing out, worried if I can pay these people. I'm worried I can keep this business alive. And all of this time, all I had to do was just like turn the nut show. Like that's all I had to do. And we had no problem. Maybe our close rate went down a little bit, but this is something that a lot of freelancers and small businesses don't realize. Your close rate should not be at 100%. I always tell people, try to keep your close rate between like 40% and 60%, and they should be leaving you because your rate is too high.
So that's a good test. If you're closing 60 to 100, you're not charging enough.
Exactly. Well, no. If you're closing 100%, 60 to 100, like if you're closing 60,
the higher you are,
that's still fine. But like if you're closing 100% of your deals, you're charging too much. If you're closing 90% of your deals, you're probably charging too much.
Yeah.
Not too much. Yes, you're charging too much.
Not charging enough.
Yeah. Well, you get what I'm saying. Yeah.
If you're selling too easily, then you're not charging enough. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of other reasons, but the reasoning that you might not get the deal, but the reason should be you cost too much.
Yeah.
Great. That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And that actually brings me to another point about charging too little, is that very often people don't take you seriously if you don't charge enough. And a really good example of this is recently I was talking to an agency that works on doing city websites, right? And they generally do very small towns, and they were competing against a company that does bigger cities. Now, this small business, they charge $1,500 to do like a very template website for a small town. And it's like $1,500 a year. I think it's vastly underpriced, but whatever. Their competition charges $100,000 for setup and $1,500 a month. Now, the small business and the other players were somewhere in that like 50,000 and up kind of range.
Yeah.
That small business, the guy that's $1,500 for the year, does a really, really good job. For what he does, it's really nice. Like I said, I think he's vastly underpricing himself, but he does a really nice job. He would not even make the first cut. They would take one look at the price difference and go, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Get rid of him. And that's exactly what happens over and over and over to him. That like, yeah, he knew what he was doing. He was doing a fine job. He did all the things. Now, granted, like sometimes it's like if he's working with a little village, it's a good fit for a village. For a city, it's not a good fit for a city. But somewhere between a village and a town, sometimes those big guys are going to come in and he's just wiped off the map because he's not charging enough. And they don't understand the value in it.
And so that a lot of that seems to also illuminate that you really need to understand who your target audience is to be able to actually price them the right way. Because if he is going after cities, really small cities, then he might be positioned better than if he's trying to go after, Metro Atlanta. They're gonna laugh him out of the room, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess let's dive into the fear and motivation that leads to underpricing for a small business or a freelancer. What's going on there, and why does that happen?
Oh, well, they're afraid they're not going to get the deal. They're afraid that, they very often they need the money, and they're like,
Okay.
well, I need to close this deal. And the problem with that, there's so many problems with that. But one problem is that when you get cheap clients, they refer you cheap clients. And so you end up in the spiral of having cheap clients and you never get out of it. So
Yeah.
and when you have clients that pay you $150 an hour, they refer you clients that pay $150 an hour and they expect to pay $150 an hour. And so one, there's the catch of that. The other thing, and this is probably more an even more important note on that, is that when you're dealing with customers that are cheap, that they don't have very much money, very often what it means is that they're small business or very small business, and that money is coming right out of their pocket. So every dollar they give you is a dollar they're not taking home to feed their family or take care of whatever or buy Christmas presents or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that money is really valuable to them. And when when the money is really valuable to somebody, they want to control it as much as possible, and they don't give you the freedom to do your job. But when you're billing a big company, when you're billing an enterprise for doing something, they trust that you know what you're doing. Like they're putting their trust in you. They're paying you a very reasonable rate. They expect you know what you're doing, and they just let you do your damn job. And and then you get it done faster, you get it done better. You work with people who know what they're doing, and they're able to move faster. Therefore, you're able to move faster, and you make more money because you're able to process more work in a faster amount of time.
And so, if you're interfacing with that small business owner that is holding on to their money tighter, it means you have to advocate stronger for yourself because they're going to push back. And so what's your recommendation for how to best do that?
Tell them you need to raise your rates. And if they say no, then you say, thanks. This was a great project. I appreciate it. Or you just kind of slowly filter them out, because what you can do is show, like, let's say you're billing at $25 an hour and you're like, okay, well, I can't keep living like this. I'm eating ramen noodles all the time. And I can't afford the water bill. So you have to go and get, customers paying you 50 or 100 or whatever it may be. And so you just tell them, like, I have to raise my rates. I have to go up. Like, I can't afford to run the business like this. And if their answer is, well, I can't pay you, then that's fine. That's business. That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
And it's better for them and it's better for you.
Yeah. But that also implies that, I guess, what if someone is actually targeting those small businesses or the ones, are you suggesting that there aren't small businesses that are good clients, or what are you saying there?
No, there's definitely small businesses that are great clients. But if you're working, we can talk about this in a minute when we talk about backing into your costs and your fully burdened cost.
Yeah.
If you're working with a small business that's paying you a small rate, then you either have to have a small cost or you have to have very large numbers of hours.
Got it.
And what I would say is that for most people watching this podcast, if you're running a service business, compare yourself to a plumber. How much money does a plumber cost in your area to come out to your house and look at a problem? you're basically a plumber. Like if you're a web developer, you're building websites, you're basically a plumber,
Yeah.
right? So what's it cost? It doesn't
Hmm.
cost $25. That's for sure. I think most places, and I'm in the city of Atlanta, I think it costs like between 75 and $125 for them to drive out and look at your house and
Hmm.
look and see what's going on. That's not for them to fix anything. That's not for them to do anything. I mean, if they can fix it in 10 minutes, cool, they just fix it and that's done. But if it's a bigger problem, you still got to pay that $125.
Yeah.
So it's taking them what, an hour and a half to come out and take a look, and they're
Hmm.
making 75 to $150.
Yeah.
And then they'll tell you how much it'll charge to do everything else. So
Yeah.
for those small businesses, you got, like, a lot of people undersell themselves. They think that they're not worth that much. They don't value their time. And so because they don't know how to value their time, which I'm going to get to in a second. And because of that, they want to charge some small amount, and then they can't do it. It's
Yeah.
impossible.
Is it simply an education issue? Is it an insecurity? Is it fear? It's all of the
It's
above?
both.
None of the above?
It's both, and it's all. There's somebody that used to be a copywriter at one of my businesses, and she wrote this great article on how she hates sending bills. She
Mm,
likes doing the work, but she hates sending the bills because she's afraid to ask. She's
yeah.
afraid to ask, or she was afraid to ask for the money. I don't know if she still is or not. But yeah, so I think that it's a fear thing. It's feeling
Is that a human fear or is it a cultural thing? Why is so many people have that particular fear of money and talking about it, dealing with it, and asking for it?
I think I
Is it conflict avoidance?
I don't really know because I'm not afraid
Yeah.
to ask
But
for money.
were you ever, or have you always been that way where it's
Yeah,
like,
I was. And I think that the reason is I was afraid that I hadn't provided enough value for the money, that I
yeah,
didn't give you enough for the money. And and it wouldn't matter how much I gave you. I still wouldn't feel like
yeah,
I had
it's almost
given
a
you enough.
never-ending feeling.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, when you have employees, when you have responsibilities, you have liabilities you have to take care of, that fear kind of goes away. When it's
Yeah.
just you, you can have that fear. But
So the
if
responsibility elevates above the fear. Is that what I'm hearing?
exactly,
Got it.
great way of saying it. Well,
Yeah.
if it doesn't, it should, and it
Yeah.
didn't for me.
Well, I can relate to that too. And just sense of my I'm married with 5 kids, and there is a tension there that to provide that is very different than when it was me by myself or just me and my wife, or
Yep,
when it was me and my wife and she was working, right?
yep, exactly. All right, I've got my notes right up here to make sure I
Yeah.
got everything.
Yeah, you mentioned burden cost. You want to dive into what that means
Yeah,
and
that's
how it
what I want
works?
to get into. This is the magic.
Okay.
This is the piece that so many people miss. Okay. So if you want to know how much money you should charge, here's the secret. Figure out how many hours you're actually working on the projects or on the things that you're doing, not on marketing, not on billing, not on collections, not on finance, not on making deals with partners, not on all that other stuff. Just that you're working on the thing. And this could be for you, or this could be for you and your employees.
Got
Figure
it.
out how much you're making on that, or how many hours you're spending on that. So let's assume that you're working 3 hours a day. And
Okay.
sometimes, by the way, you have to actually track it. Like, go get a subscription to Harvest, that's getharvest.com, and start tracking your time so you
Yeah.
know exactly how much time you're actually spending. And it's going to surprise a lot of people because they're like, I
Yeah.
work 12 hours a day and I don't make any money. And you take a look and you're like, oh, because I only did 2 hours of billable work today and I only did 8 for the entire week.
Yeah.
And this happens all the time. So
Yeah.
figure out how much money, I'm sorry, how much time you're actually spending.
Hmm.
And then how much money does your business cost you?
Yeah.
So, like, how much money, like your electricity, your phone, your insurance, your computer, your people, whatever other materials you need to do your business.
Yeah.
And then all you do is you just divide, what is it, your money divided by the amount of hours you're actually working, and that gives you the rate to break even.
Okay.
And then what I recommend is whatever that rate is. So by the way, if you're on average working, let's say 2 hours a day, and you track that for a month, and you realize, let's say your cost is going to be, I don't know, by the way, you got to include your salary. That's one thing everybody forgets.
Okay.
Like, you got your cost of the business plus your salary. So let's say you're making $4,000 or $5,000 per month, add that right in there. So let's just say that your salary plus the cost is going to be like $6,000 a month or $5,000 a month. I think my math might be easier that way. And then we divide this by, let's say you're working 4 hours a day. So 4 times 20, 100 hours or 80 hours. Yeah. So then we got to so you got 80 hours for the month. And it would be 5,000 divided by 80. What does that equal? Hold on, I'll tell you. 5,000 divided by 80, 6,250. Okay. So a lot of people are doing this and they're billing $35 an hour. And what they realize real fast is, I need to double my rate tomorrow. I need to double it right now. And that's just to break even. That does not include your profit margin, in which you need to add in as well. So
and taxes and all
and
that.
Taxes. Well, I was kind of including taxes in the first part also, but yeah, like let's go ahead and include taxes in there as well. And then you're taking a look and you're going, oh, well, if I add a 30% profit margin to all of this, what's 30%, 32, let's say 62.5 times 0.3. That's plus 18 plus 62.5, 81.25. So to break even and have a 30% profit margin on a business where you're making, what do we say, $5,000 or $4,000 plus the cost of the business, you're looking at having to charge 81.25 per hour. And probably you're not, like, there's things that you miss. There's you'd work more and whatever. That's what you got to charge just to get by. And so that is the cost. When I talked about the fully burdened cost, is the cost of everything in the business, taxes included. So that is the fully burdened cost divided by workable hours, and there's your rate. And this is something that people don't do, and they just kill themselves. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I wrote about in Path of Freelancer was also essentially doing what you're describing, but with a little bit of different order. Essentially start with, as a freelancer, how much money do you want to earn per year and how many hours do you want to work each year? And that gives you a rate, and then you can essentially adjust that accordingly. But this idea of just, I think for me, when I did that, and when I talk to others, a lot of it is just about being, it's not rocket science, it's just being intentional, taking the time to be intentional and figure this out. But I don't know, what do you think? Do you think people, is it just a lack of experience, or what's driving that?
I think it's a lack of experience, and I think it's a lack of, it's a lot of things. Let's go with lack of experience though, because, what do they say? Like, the number one indicator of the success of a business is how many times the person leading the business has done it before. So, it's just, it's a lack of experience. The other piece of this though, is a lot of times people feel like they need to close the sale because they feel like they're like, oh, if I don't close this thing, then I'm not going to have any money. And that comes right back to what I was saying in the beginning. Yeah. If you close it if you close a client that you don't want for an amount of money that's not really good for you, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Yeah. You're going to suffer for that customer so much for that amount of money that you just didn't, that you didn't want them in the first place. And then you made yourself do it. And then you're suffering for it afterwards for a long time. And then you got to keep dealing with that person. And then very often those really low paying customers, they don't want to pay you anyway.
Yeah.
So,
it's a double whammy.
Yeah. So choosing your customers is probably one of the most important pieces, especially when you're getting started. I think that, Jason, you and I have both been through lawsuits where customers have sued us for things that had nothing to do with us. That, for me at least, I can't remember what you went through, but I remember for me, Like I got sued for something. I was like, I don't even know who this person is, you know,
Oh, wow.
and and it was one of those customers we didn't really want in the first place. And I find over and over again that those kinds of customers are more likely to be problems, and sometimes huge problems, just like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And if you got a bad client and they're not paying you enough, and then it's just unraveling the cycle you mentioned earlier. So you also wanted to talk about just pricing competitively and lowest bidder situations. So tell us about that.
All right, so one thing that I like to always avoid is a race to the bottom.
Hmm.
So if you're bidding down something and you're a services company, that's the last thing you want to do, because what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Just race to the bottom, like to be the lowest bidder for what? Like go find another customer who wants to pay you a reasonable amount for the kinds of things you're doing. You know,
Yeah.
so I think that what we did is as a business is we early on we said we're not competing on price. That, you know, like we're competitive, and, you know, like we're not going to
Yeah.
like say we're $1,000 an hour, like, so, you know, we do compete on price. But if somebody comes in and says, I want you to lower your rate, then
Hmm.
we say, I'm sorry, we're not a good fit for you. Like
Hmm.
if you want us to lower your rate, you're not valuing us, and so we don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Now that does break down at a certain point. So
Okay.
I'll tell you where that point is. So this has to do with charging on value versus charging on time, or
Okay.
competitively, or, you know, like the different methods of charging. So if you're a freelancer, you're a small business, you're charging on value. You can say, like, the value of me doing this thing is this amount. It is
Yeah.
worth this much money to you. And, you know, like, what's the example? Picasso drawing the picture for the woman on the street, and she says, how much does it cost? He says 30,000. She says, what do you mean? It took you 2 seconds to draw that. And he says, no, it took me 30 years to draw that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of true, you
Yeah.
know, like I can give you, in 1 hour, we're having this conversation based on all of these
Hmm.
years of screwing stuff up. So,
Yeah.
you know, what's that worth? Right.
Yeah. And
Um,
so, do you always encourage value-based pricing, or do you think it's situational?
it's situational. And here's the difference. Thanks for putting me back on track on that.
Yeah.
So I think if you're service business, you're small service business, you're better off doing value-based pricing. And
Okay.
I think that you can maintain a higher price, you can provide a better thing. You can, when you charge that higher price, you have the flexibility to really go all out and do something amazing for people. Whereas
Yeah.
if you're really down to just billing, billing by the hour, and you're kind of feeling pressed against the top, then you can only do so much. And
Yeah.
I found that the trick with selling on value. Oh, I'm sorry. The trick on selling on value is how you go into the sale. And I think that, I don't know if we're going to have time to talk about how to sell on value. I
Yeah.
think you probably talk a lot about that in your book, and
Not so much. I've I think I take more of the approach of hourly and fixed face, but part of that is because I haven't mastered the value selling process. And so that's if you want to speak into that a little bit, you can.
I'll tell you what, take me back to that in just a second, and let me finish
Yeah.
the part I was
Yeah.
on. So where does
Yeah.
it break down? I'll tell you where it breaks down. If you're doing something that is somewhat commoditized, or you're
Yeah.
doing very large kinds of work. So I'll give you a good example of this is at my agency, sometimes we'll do digital marketing work. Digital marketing is sold on value. Sometimes what our big customers are large factories, and we build their manufacturing resource planning tools for them. So we build
Yeah.
custom, large scale enterprise tools, and we've been doing this for many, many years. Like those are those are the guys that pay our bills.
Yeah.
And for those kinds of companies, the guys at the top of those companies, they know exactly how much money this should cost. They
Yeah.
know exactly what their budget is. They know we bring in a full team to do this thing. And, we come in at this price, and they come back and they say, we want to do this deal, but we'd like for you to be at this kind of rate, at this kind of place, and provide these kinds of deliverables and XYZ thing. And we take a look at the long term, and we go, this is a 5-year project. It's fine. It's completely fine. We're going to have 3 full-time people working for 5 years on this project. Just,
Yeah.
just do it. We're going to be completely fine. So at a certain point, like they're looking at that money amount because you can't do something that's that big, and it's not a one-off kind of project, and it's something that you
Yeah.
can do with them forever. So
Hmm.
it's a different, at that point it starts to break down.
Okay.
All right,
So yeah. So what I was talking about was value-based
value-based pricing.
selling.
Yeah,
But
selling.
yeah, and I think for me, I've got a lot of the pieces in place to move there. And in a way, I sort of evaluated my time, and I essentially, the way I think about it is I'm giving people a share of my time, and different clients take different shares of that time. But I'm not truly doing value-based pricing in terms of how I'm charging. It's just more of how I've got it structured. So I'm positioned to do it, but I'm missing the piece of when I'm selling it, and how I'm bringing alignment towards what it is we're accomplishing, and then how I'm charging a value price for that thing. And the other piece of the puzzle for me, and the reason that I haven't moved towards it sooner than I have now, is the risk. It's a higher risk to do value-based pricing. So I've also been positioning myself to have less risk to be able to do it. And so I'm also better positioned than I was in terms of like paying off our debts and just being in a better financial position. Make sense?
Yep. All
Yeah.
right. So here's the trick for value-based pricing.
Yeah.
You have to show them the value.
Yeah.
So when you come in, so let's say we're going to sell a website for and digital marketing plan for, I don't know, pick a business type.
Let's say an online training business.
An online training business.
They do webinars, courses, events,
Okay.
coaching.
So that would be a tough one because that's going to be somebody who already knows the online space really well and probably has a really good feeling for everything. Let's do this. How about somebody that, let's say that your business is training people that do online courses.
Okay.
So you've been working you've done online courses for years and years. Let's say let's say this was your business because you've been doing this. You run a podcast, you know how to do the blog, you know how to do the SEO, you know how to set everything up, you know what systems to use. You have all of this stuff already put together.
Yeah.
Now it only takes you like an hour to like give them a piece of paper that's like, here's how to do the thing.
With the blueprint. Yeah.
The blueprint for the whole thing. How long would it take them to figure that out?
Years and years. Yeah.
Exactly. So for you going in, doing like a train the course builder thing, if you come in and you're like, and you say, well, my cost is $2,500, flat fee, one time, $2,500, and you go through this series. I do let's say I'm going to do 4 meetings with you per month.
Yeah.
And I'm going to walk you through getting your course done, and it's going to be a 3-month thing. So $7,500, and then you can add other ways to do it. And we're going to do $7,500, and it's going to be 12 conversations.
Yeah.
So when we do this, you're going to get all of this data, all of this setup, all of this. And what you can do is you can start adding up the cost of these things. And you say, how long would it take you to have this thing done? Okay, well, it would take that much time. How much would it take you to have this much time? Oh, that would take me, blah, blah, blah. And so they can see the value of that thing that you're offering right away. And they're going to realize like, oh, crud. You're like, is it going to cost, how much money is it going to cost me to do that? A lot more than $7,500.
Yeah.
So given your example, there wasn't like a great
yeah. I think I think that's helpful in the sense of like having that fixed fee to deliver a specific project, right? And that's part of, for my own journey, just getting more and more clear on what it is I'm doing and where I'm doing it and who I'm doing it for. I think the challenge historically for me has been that in a lot of ways, I'm jumping into a burning building type situation. That might be a little extreme, but
no, I bet it's not extreme. I bet it's actually, I know some of the situations you've jumped into, and how about a burning business situation?
Yeah. but it's chaos. That's probably another way to look at it. And so there isn't a finite scope of work. It's you're hiring me to go into the fire to figure out what is happening and causing the fire, and then to stop the fire, and then to rebuild it, right? So that's the value in a lot of ways. But to quantify that, it's been elusive.
No, to quantify this is easy. How
Yeah.
much money have you put into the business? Like let's a burning business example. You're the business owner and I'm the consultant. Hey, Jason, I know we're talking about this burning business you got. It looks like it's on fire over there, and you need somebody to put it out. How much money do you think you've put into this business over the last 10 years?
Let's say $10 million.
$1 million. That's it's a okay size business.
Yeah.
How much you putting in right now?
Per year?
Per month?
Okay, per month. Let's say $25,000 a month.
25 a month. All right, great. If the business fails, how much money do you think you're going to lose?
Well, I'd lose all the money I've put into it, and then I'd owe the debt that I have, right? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. So 10 million plus the debt you got. So the real, like maybe you put 10 million in, but then the debt you got is maybe, let's say 150,000 in debt.
Okay.
Something like that. Does that sound like a reasonable number for some of these businesses? Okay, so you lose your 150,000 now, plus the 10 million you put into the business. Plus, what are you going to do next? You're going to start another business. You got to start something from the ground up. What's your plan for that if this thing doesn't work?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would. I think those scenarios would be realistic. Yeah.
So, how much do you think it would be worth to have someone to come in and fix it for you? Like, what would, if you were going to charge to come in and fix a business like this, or just tell me, what do you think it would be worth to have it fixed?
I mean, it would be somewhere between, well, I guess let's take the scenario where I just shut it down and move on, right? Then I have the debt. So the debt is 120,000. But then the extreme case would be 10 million that I'm losing, that I've lost, right? So that's somewhere between 125,000 and 10 million. I guess, let's say I just walk away, because that's the actual cost. Is it worth $10,000, paying you $10,000 to try and recover 125? That would be something that would come to mind. Or is it worth 25,000, or is it worth 50? Somewhere, if there's a way I can recover the 125,000 for a fraction of that, when I would lose all of that by walking away, then there's something there that would be worthwhile for me.
Okay, so how about we do $10,000 per month to start, and if you don't like it after the first month, you can fire me at any time.
Yeah. So that, then I guess, what is that tied to in terms of as a service provider?
It's tied to their fear that their business is going to go under.
Okay.
So what are the deliverables on that?
So they're paying me 10 grand a month to alleviate that fear, right?
To alleviate the fear and really to go in and fix it. Like, it wouldn't be that simple, because you'd probably say, like, I need X number of dollars to run an analysis of what's going on in the business. So you got a flat fee amount that you can that's going to cover your time. You're 100% sure it's going to cover your time to figure out what's going to go on. And then once you have that, then you probably come back and say, like, after you pay me this fixed fee to figure out where the problems are, then I'll deliver you a plan that's going to tell you how to go in and fix all these things. And I happen to know this because I've worked on multiple turnaround jobs in the past, and that's usually how it goes, is they pay you like a chunk of change to go figure out the problem and build a plan to solve it. And then they pay you an even bigger chunk of change to go and execute on that plan.
Yeah, and when we had in my marketing company, that's something that we learned. We charged for a discovery audit. I think where we didn't maximize our potential was then we just charged a fixed fee for the execution instead of a value-based price on the execution. Does that make sense?
So sometimes you have to do fixed fees, sometimes value-based, sometimes it's hourly. Like it really depends also on the company, and on the job. But if you're small, 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 man shop, you can make those kinds of things. You make those decisions pretty easily. Like you can sell it for what it's worth.
Yeah, yeah. So I think on the, so to give another example then, you know, let's say it's not a burning building situation, but it's more a vision type of situation. Like I want to do this to help you grow your business. Do you tend to do you do like performance-based tethers, or is it strictly a value-based pricing that assumes you're going to deliver the performance, and if you don't, then it's the risk is on the owner?
So for the most part, the risk is on the owner. I
Yeah,
rarely do performance-based stuff. The only time I do performance-based is if I'm 100% sure. If I take a look and I'm like, yeah, we're going to blow this away. So, which is the kind of customers I love to have, because then I can offer them that. And this is the this is the thing, is like when you come in and you're like, I'm going to win at this and I'd like a cut of it. And here's my
yeah,
performance-based thing. The first thing they did was go, whoa, 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 whoa. How about I just pay you? How much
yeah,
do you want to do this? Because if like now I'm feeling like you're gonna like start eating into my profits,
hmm
even though like they're probably gonna do better if they pay performance-based. They
yeah,
get nervous because then it's easier to close the sale, because they're like, well, this guy said he'd like do it for this amount, but I think we should just pay the guy. He clearly knows what he's
yeah.
doing. He's willing to risk all this stuff.
Well, and that's where I think, in terms of negotiating, as far as how I understand it, that's those are the 2 points, right? Like in terms of like the if you do completely performance based, here's how much you pay me, $2 million. Or if you're going to just pay me, then it's 150 grand or whatever,
Yeah,
right? That's the tension. That's the negotiating room. Who's going to take the risk and how much of that risk, right?
exactly.
And then the reward for that risk.
Yeah, we have done both over time. Um, the the kinds of work that we do these days at my agency just doesn't lend itself to being performance based, because we're building SaaS products for mid-sized businesses, and it's not something we can't control the performance of it, because we're not the marketing team for them. We're the software development, architecture, planning team for them. We give a lot of feedback on marketing, but you're talking a mid-sized business, you're talking something $500 million a year business, and they're
Yeah.
not like they're too big for us to do all of that stuff for them.
So then
So
how are you quantifying the value of, let's say you're building them a website? How are you
so
quantifying that?
that's what I was saying, that it breaks down at a certain point. We're not building a website for small business where we can say like, you're going to do these things. They came to us with an RFP that was like, you've been shortlisted already because you're well known in the industry for doing these things. Here's what we want. How much do you think it'll cost?
Yeah,
And very often like that's a whole other conversation too, because we'll go take a look and go, yeah, I see what you're asking for, but what you want is not really what you want, and the way you're doing this isn't going to make
hmm
money. So give us a call. We'll talk to you for free. We'll tell you where you screwed it up, and then we'll show you how to actually make it profitable. And then you're going to probably send the work to us anyway, because nobody else does that.
yeah. Well, and but I guess what you're illuminating is the performance. It may not be in sales, but the performance for you and your client is that you're going to deliver an experience to build the project, and then you're going to deliver a finished project that they're happy with,
Yeah, I would say
right?
the value, not the performance, but yes.
Yeah. But well, that's what I mean, I guess, is your performance is delivering the execution, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
kinds of things that we build, are multi-million dollar applications. So
But I guess
yeah,
that's kind of where I'm curious is like to your point about me, like the burning building, or the value that I could provide business owners, that I'm alleviating their fear of their business shut down, right? The fear that you're alleviating is that I'm going to get a really solid project at the end of this, and I don't have to worry about it along the way,
that's
right?
exactly right. Because
Yeah,
there's so many software companies out there that will just rip
yeah,
your thing apart. They will deliver a half-ass product that, or sometimes less than that,
yeah.
an eighth of an ass product, and uh, and
And
then
you're just not going to do that. It's not
and
who
you're
you are.
just done. There's
Yeah,
one company that we worked with for several years now. They started that we were the fourth company that took on the project. The first
yeah,
two companies failed completely at the product, and they spent $100,000 per company with them. The third company was somebody that was owned by somebody I knew, and it was a consultancy. And the CEO of the consultancy called me and she said, we're going to fail at this. This is too complex for us. We're
Yeah.
not winning. We're going to fail at the
Yeah.
project. I just want to hand it to you. I'll give you all the documents. I'll give you all the things. I'll give you everything you need. You just take it. And
Yeah.
so we were the fourth one to come in and we blew it away.
And did you ask how much would it be worth it to you for us to deliver what you expected at the beginning?
I
Or
think
something like
at the
that?
beginning of that, it was more like they were very afraid because they'd
Yeah.
been through 3 other companies who had failed and 2 had failed terribly, and they spent a lot of money with them. So in that case, we recognized that this was going to be an ongoing product that was worth, hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. And so we said, we actually started we started in small chunks to gain trust. And then we built into bigger and bigger and bigger
Okay.
products until we finally had something that was really a substantial size
Okay.
product.
Yeah, that's similar to how I operate. Is a lot of times I work with business owners that they've been burned, right? And I have to help them learn to trust again.
Exactly.
So yeah. So I guess one other thought on the pricing. What happens if we've got the sales process figured out? We've got how we're going to charge, how we're going to price, how we're going to bill. What if we're not actually generating the leads to make that work?
So I got one other thing before we jump into leads, but it has to do with leads. So I'm gonna lead into it. All right. So my challenge to everybody listening, for your next customer that comes in, I want you to double your price.
Okay.
Double the price. And the next one that comes in, I want you to double it again. Okay. And I want you to keep doubling it until you keep getting no's.
Okay. And is that if they're charging fixed fee or an hourly rate or anything?
However you want to charge it, however you currently do it. 90% of people that are listening to this podcast, 95% are charging too little. If you're charging less than $200 an hour, you're very often, or you could be charging more. I'm not saying you're charging too little if you're, it depends on what you do, right?
Yeah.
But if you're charging less than $200 an hour, and especially if you're charging less than $100 an hour, my challenge to you is to double your price, and every time keep doubling it until somebody says no, or until you consistently get no's, and then start backing it off. And how do you do that? The only way to do that is to have a lot of leads coming in and to be effective at your marketing. And I think that this is the thing that so many small businesses, like, they know their craft, they know the thing that they're due, but they're either afraid to get on the phone and make phone calls and cold call people, or they don't know how, or they're afraid to send out emails. They're afraid to find a list and figure out and start emailing and growing their business. Like, I think that that's actually 3/4 of the battle, is that people are afraid to do sales. And so they end up with this small group of people, and they can't expand outside of that.
Yeah.
And then they can't raise their prices because they have too few customers available to them. And this is for all sorts of reasons, like they're not focused enough. They're trying to do too much. They're like, very often freelancers are like, oh, I do everything in digital marketing, and you're like, yeah, but you don't do it well. You do a half-assed job at almost everything. Versus the people that are amazing at one thing in one industry have all that industry's business.
And so I guess a couple of questions there. Well, one, your idea of just you keep increasing pricing until they start saying no all the time. But you're also suggesting you do that with new clients versus existing, right?
Yeah. So what I would say is, like, let's say you have a customer base of 20 customers.
Yeah.
If you've been working with them and they're pretty consistent and they're good customers, maybe you can start raising them up slowly. You don't want to piss people off. Like, you don't want to run a bad business. But if you're let's say you're charging $20 an hour and you're not making ends meet with your 20 customers, I would probably say just take it up to $40 an hour and just tell them, look, I'm sorry, or $50 an hour, whatever it is that you need to go to based on your fully burdened cost, and just tell them, listen, I cannot provide you the service any longer if I can't charge more because I can't afford to pay my bills. And if
Okay.
you can't deal with that, I totally understand. I can refer you to somebody else, set up a referral agreement so you get some money off that. But I can refer you to somebody else and you can work with them. But I have to pay my bills. And in order to do that, I have to make this much money. And
Yeah.
almost everybody will understand. And if they don't understand, you don't want to do business with them anyway.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I've increased my rate every year, and it's usually not an issue. I actually had one client that it was an issue in one of the earlier years. He stopped working with me, and then several years later, he came back and said, "Not working you with was one of the worst mistakes I ever made. I'll pay you whatever you want."
Yep.
And he started working with me again. So that was, but yeah, to your point, there might be a little bit of fallout, but from my experience, it's usually a minor. Although it might depend on like how much you're charging and who you're working with, but if you do it at least with existing clients more incrementally, it's definitely an option. So what would be your final thoughts and words for us as we close out this discussion on pricing?
All right. So I got a number of things, but also a story in line with the one you just mentioned. There was a
Yeah.
client I had years ago. He came in to do a website and digital marketing project with us. This is before we started doing all this SaaS stuff and
Okay. Yeah.
where we are now. I think it was a fixed fee project, and it was like $7,500.
Yeah.
And it was undercharged at that. And he came in, he was furious. He was like, I will never pay you that much money to do this. I will
Wow.
never do it. And this is somebody who had been a customer for a while, but it was a big project. He didn't understand what he was asking for.
Yeah.
And he left furious, and everybody was very upset about it. I was very upset. I didn't mean to upset anybody. I felt terrible about it. But I looked at it over and over, and I was like, this is a reasonable amount of money for the things that we're doing. It's even a little undercharged.
Yeah.
I'm not bending on this. We're not
Hmm.
losing money to work for somebody. I'm not paying to
Yeah.
do your project. And when we looked at the numbers, that's what it would be. We would have been paying to do his project if we took it much to what he wanted us to take it to.
Yeah.
A year later, he comes into the office. He has to talk to me. We sit down in the conference room. This is back when we had offices. And he says, I have spent a year and 3 times as much money as you're going to bill me trying to get this thing done at half the cost. And I still have nothing to show for it.
Wow.
Whatever you want to charge, you just tell me and I'll just sign it right now.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that I gave you such a hard time a year ago.
Wow. That's vindication, right?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I had one other little piece on this, like something else about that plays into this a lot. I have one customer I've worked with that really wanted me to come meet with him. But before I took the role I'm in now, I traveled a lot, and we always spent the fall in Southeast Asia. So my girlfriend and I, we would go to fly to Thailand in October, and then we would come home in either December or January. And I told him, I was like, I can't meet with you. I'm going to Thailand. And he's like, well, I really want to meet. I was like, I'm sorry, man. Like, I'm going to Thailand. And I remember talking to my chief operations officer, and I was like, I think we might have lost the deal because I'm not going to like hold up the plan and hold up all this stuff to go meet with this guy. And he's going to have to wait months. And she said, no, he's going to value you more because of it.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, I don't know, it's kind of a big deal. Like, it would be nice to get it. Maybe I should bend on this. And she's like, no, I'm telling you, he's going to look at you like you're a rock star. And she was 100% right. He waited
Yeah.
until we got back from Thailand. And when we came in that meeting, he was like, I want to live your life. You clearly have things figured out. You clearly know what you're doing. You're able to go to Thailand for 3 months. Let's do this work together.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. And that's part of like that holding that higher rate, it's kind of it's in the same vein as that, is that when you say like, I'm worth this much money, this is what I'm going to do. Here's my value bombs I'm going to drop on you right in this first meeting. They respect you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. So what else?
All right. So final pieces. Hold on. I kind of wrote some notes. Charging enough, pricing. All the consultants say, charge more. I'm telling you the same thing. Charge more. You're worth it. You can do
Yeah,
it. Make sure to run your fully burdened cost. Make sure you understand how much money you need in order to live, in order to run your business, and in order to have a good life. Because when you start your own business, whether you're a freelancer or any other kind of entrepreneur, you're doing that so that you have a good life.
yeah,
So do the things that it takes to have a good life.
yeah,
You're taking a risk. You're working super hard. You're killing yourself to do this. The goal is a good life.
yeah.
So make sure to run the numbers so that you know what you need and you can provide for yourself and for your families to have a good life.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it.
Of course. It's so good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Have a good one.